Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Know what time it is? It's time once again for me to review the cartoon prequel to a movie series I've never seen. I wanted to see the two Hotel Transylvania movies before I reviewed this show, but you know me and my next level procrastination skills. But of course, a good cartoon, prequel or not, should probably be able to stand on its own without prior knowledge of its movie. I think Hotel Transylvania the series does that okay. Like I said, it's a prequel to the two movies, likely done because they don't want to deal with continuity when it comes to the upcoming third movie. So, what do you do but go backwards? The plot is pretty basic as far as plots go. Mavis's father Dracula's gone away and left her basically in charge. Well, really he left his sister Lydia in charge. And the shenanigans ensue from there. Coming from a place where I literally don't know any of these characters, I admit to being a little lost at first, but once I realized that most, if not all, of the main characters in these episodes are new, you're good. You probably get more out of them if you've seen the movies and maybe make the connection that they're the kids you didn't know some of the movie monsters actually had. The first half of the episode, Enter the Nose Picker, is as close to an introduction as you can get with these types of shows, starting off with a band of skeleton mariachis explaining the plot of the series. But then it quickly skips an unknown amount of time ahead instead of allowing us to see what the first day of Lydia being in charge was like. Which is fine because we do get a good idea of how strict she is by episode's end. It's a rather serviceable story about Mavis needing to keep the hotel tidy for some hotel reviewer who was coming. I'm just a little disappointed they went with such a common story for their first episode. Other than the grading system being skulls and not stars, it could have happened in any other show. But it was fairly funny too, so it wasn't all bad. The latter half of the episode is Hide and Shriek and involves Mavis and friends being tormented by a ghost doll. The doll itself is very creepy thanks to its design and mannerisms, and is one element that I hope to see more of. Hotel Transylvania seems to have these horror elements, obviously toned down, that I'd love to see get featured more. I love comedic, macabre shows, and if this show can deliver on that with weird little creations like a ghost doll, I'm game. This one also gives us a little more time with the side characters like Hank and whoever the two other friends are. Still not sure I like these characters or not. I'd almost prefer it be Mavis only, but I guess I need someone for her to interact with. Now, having seen this first episode, divided into Enter the Nose Picker and Hide and Shriek, it's a little hard to nail down whether this show will be good or not. There's plenty of macabre comedy and just regular old comedy, and the characters all seem fun, but I may need to see more to really form an opinion on it. Luckily, I will probably be reviewing this weekly until such a time as I get bored with it. Otherwise, I think these two episodes were pretty good. From what little I've seen of the movies, the comedy seems in line with it, but fans will have to let me know about that one. The one problem is that the episode seems to go by really quickly. Nose Picker is resolved way too fast, but Hide and Shriek felt like it went on for a decent amount of time and was resolved well. But what else can I say? Other than I really do love the animation style. It's got this cute charm to it, especially with Mavis's character model. Something else to note is that, like with other movies that transition into TV shows, the cast has been entirely swapped out. Given that I never saw the movies, I can't really compare them, but I do like most of the voice actors they went with, except for Hank. I feel like he's got too high a voice for a Frankenstein monster. Man, I feel like I really haven't said much about this show in this video, but honestly, I mean, what else can I say? It's funny, it looks good, and I think if you're already a fan of the movies, you'll like it. Although I probably wouldn't look for any of the more serious moments that were probably found in the movies in this show. Even a character's line about eating a toddler included the character immediately admitting that they just scolded a child. So, not going to be as macabre as other similar shows. So, yeah, what did you think of Hotel Transylvania, the series? Does it hold up to the movies, or do you think it's just a cheap cash-in? Let me know down below. To watch this episode, you can watch it officially on Disney Channel's apps, YouTube channel, and soon television. While you're still here, make sure to check out my merch store and Patreon if you'd like to support my channel. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I seriously hate when a new cartoon has a week of premieres. It puts a lot more of a strain on me knowing I have to watch, write, and record a brand new review every single day on top of whatever other content I've got to produce, plus my day job. And it's generally followed with a lack of a consistent schedule on the network's part, so I don't get the point of doing them. Be that as it may, I need to do this even if I'm already behind. So let's get to the second episode's A part, Bad Friday. You know, like Good Friday, except bad and with monsters doing the Monsters Incorporated thing and having a scare-off of sorts. That's the premise for this next episode of Hotel Transylvania, and I'm rather indifferent towards it, especially when it becomes a competition to scare each other, instead of going out and scaring the local townsfolk. And the scares never evolve into anything noteworthy or fun or, better yet, creepy. One scare is literally Hank tripping and frightening the slug. Another is the slime girl, and not the hentai kind, sneaking up on another character. Like I said, the scares aren't even fun. The event only gets a slight pick-me-up when Mavis's fear and confusion over the human act of cleaning a baby's diaper leaves her screaming loudly enough and fearfully enough to scare the slug, thus putting her far above her ant score and causing the other monsters to put her act to song. That's really the only noteworthy moment in the episode, as the early moments put Mavis into the annoying role of a rebelling daughter refusing to participate in Bad Friday. There's not really a good explanation for her attitude, and thus she comes off extremely bratty and unlikable, when last episode she was much more fun. So, while Bad Friday never becomes bad itself, it never seems to rise to the occasion and leaves the fun concept of monsters competing to scare each other basically unfulfilled. Mavis is bad at giving gifts, something she plans on fixing in Hoop Screams, where she digs up a pair of hands to help Hank be better at basketball. It's an odd idea, but then, again, this is an odd show. This also marks the first time thus far that the show gives more attention to one of the supporting cast members instead of Mavis, even if she is the catalyst. And that's Hank, a character I've already gone on record as saying I'm not incredibly in love with. Hoop Screams didn't really change that opinion, but it does set out to really flesh out the character beyond his more shallow appearance in episode 1. Well, I say fleshed out, but it's more like giving him some unique traits. The idea of Frankenstein-esque monsters being barely sewn together, it's not new, nor is the idea of their body parts being independent from themselves. But it's at least something to give a little spice to the character, though the writers do this by making the relationship between Hank and his hands bordering on romance. This concept can work well, like in Phineas and Ferb, where Doofenshmirtz and Perry's antagonistic relationship was sometimes portrayed like they were an old married couple in later episodes. They weren't, obviously. However, here it's just weird, and not in a good way, and I don't know if it works all that well. Mind you, it's certainly unique, but it's just a really odd inclusion. I can give props to the show's writers for putting Hank into the spotlight, but the execution left much to be desired. There weren't a lot of laughs to be had, and the actual meat of the story just wasn't worth the time. That leaves episode 2 being a pretty disappointing episode, with both its A and B parts either being lackluster or mediocre. This is definitely an episode to skip, unless you're just morbidly curious. But maybe you think differently. Share your thoughts on episode 2 down below. I'd love to hear what your favorite or least favorite moments were. You can watch Hotel Transylvania, the series, on Disney Channel. Check your local listings. While you're still here, please consider checking out my merch store or Patreon if you want to support the channel. Thanks for watching. Take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. So I don't have much to say on episode 3A, Bugging Out, so this part of the video may be a little on the short side. See, a game eats up 12 whole days when Mavis should have been doing her chores. Girl, don't I know it. Video games are a big time waster. She manages to catch up mostly, but unfortunately doesn't have the bed bugs her aunt asked for. Luckily, Pedro has some bugs inside him. I'm mostly down for the weird eccentricity one would imagine a hotel like this would have, but even I don't get why the monsters would want bed bugs. With bedbugs in hand, she and her friends deliver them room to room via an incredibly out-of-place rap song. I was enjoying this episode right up to this point and was taken out of it immediately. I don't get who thought kids who enjoyed Hotel Transylvania would also want rapping in their cartoon, but they should be fired. It wasn't even a good rap song either. It's easily the worst part of the episode and the show so far. Did we learn nothing from the Powerpuff Girls reboot? The rest of the episode reveals their truth bugs and cause people to, speak the truth. It leads to some okay comedic moments and a really great hero moment for Mavis towards the end. That and the macabre moment where the doctor chops his own head off, albeit off screen, were some of my favorite bits.
Blade was done. Now I gotta finish the job myself. Did it.
How do you solve a problem like Medusa is probably the best story we've gotten since the first episode. There's something incredibly amusing and cute about Mavis getting stuck with Medusa's snakes and the panic she goes into immediately afterwards. In fact, most of this episode is pretty downright funny. From Medusa turning to stone, Mavis's many reactions, her uncle balking at milking a cow, to Lydia's grin at the end. It all put a big grin on my face. It's a really well put together story that helps elevate episode 3 from being just okay to actually good. Also, it didn't have any cringeworthy musical numbers, so there's that. And that wraps up my thoughts on episode 3. What did you think? Share those opinions down below. Be sure to check out my merch store and Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello, lords and ladies. Welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. Adventures in Vampire Sitting. What can I say about this boring episode? I'm sorry, but it just rubbed me the wrong way. Monsters Incorporated did the concept of monsters fearing humans a lot better than this episode. Not to mention, I'm totally lost on some details. See, in Bad Friday, it was implied monsters used to scare humans, not themselves. Yet, in this episode, the Doctor talks about humans being horrible, scary, and having super strength. Sure, there's some correlation between being scared of something and taking your fear out on it, but is that what this is? And did the movies establish that humans knew about the monster's existence? 'Cause they sure do here, and it's a little confusing. You could say I'm making a fuss over tiny details, but hey, the devil is in the details. Since the entire episode's story involves Mavis and gang entering a human's home to prove they're not scary, subsequently throwing a brief party, then having to deal with the angry mom's botched invasion of her own tightly secured home, I'd say those details become a little more important. The foundation of the whole thing, if you will. Now, there's a few decent moments, mostly minor, but worthy of a chuckle. Unfortunately, since the human mother's technically in the right here, watching the main character viciously sick the house's alarm systems on her is actually quite awful to behold. Plus, there's another musical moment and it's terrible. No, there's no rapping to be seen, but whoever wrote the lyrics and songs for this show also needs to be fired, because my god, they are not good. I think the last time I enjoyed one of the musical numbers was in episode 1. Adventures in Vampire Sitting is more of an adventure on how not to write a good episode. Despite a few okay moments sprinkled throughout, they can't save this story. It's got weird pacing issues, leaving you feeling like nothing actually happened. And then there's the nonsensical plot done far better in other works of fiction. It definitely could have been far better than what we ended up getting. I'd recommend skipping this one. Now, I'm not one for sports. Not even sports with weird monster twists like flimball, which doesn't seem much different than basketball, other than the ball being a monster snot and the players being able to leave the court. So, this episode wasn't really that interesting to me. Mavis's cousin visits and challenges her for the Golden Fangs, and that sets up Mavis trying to win at any cost, even betraying her closest friend because she craves winning. There could have been something there, especially with the reveal that the monsters let Mavis win on purpose due to her father being Dracula, but nothing comes from it, other than an admittedly weak apology and resolution towards the end, and ultimately weeks pass and Mavis is still in a struggle to get the ball away from her cousin. Whereas Part A to this episode had at least some laughs, this one was devoid of any. There was even a poop joke, the lowest of lows in comedy. Honestly, I'm really shocked that the quality of episodes seems to be going down as we move further away from the premiere. Not every episode can be perfect, but geez, this is the second episode in a row that's been disappointing. No, actually, this is the first one to be completely bad. Oh well, maybe things will pick up. Surely the writers are just trying to find their rhythm. But those are my thoughts on episode 4. Got any yourselves? Share them down below. While you're still here, check out my merch store and Patreon if you'd like to support the channel. Links are down in the description. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. So I'm quite late to this, but I'm finally getting around to reviewing episode 5 of Hotel Transylvania. Let's start with the first story, Wendy Big and Tall, which you think would be an episode centered solely on Wendy, and it kinda does, but it's definitely more from Mavis's point of view. See, in the episode, Wendy is tired of being small and not being taken seriously by her father. Mavis talks her into trying out some of her ideas when her own father isn't appreciative of her work either. Obviously, things go awry. Honestly, I'm not feeling this episode very much. There are some amusing moments peppered throughout, and Mavis is always a delight, but it just felt a little boring. Wendy gets supersized and is all of a problem for a few seconds before agreeing to become small to save her dad. It's resolved in no time flat, which means the conflict doesn't really resonate. Episode 1 had this same problem with being so short. It'd be fine maybe if the events of the episode were more memorable, but sadly even a giant Wendy can't save the day. Possibly because she's such a boring, bland character to begin with. Luckily, the second half of the episode, Doppelganger, is a little bit better. Mavis acting Gaga of her favorite singer is cute and fairly amusing, especially once her evil mindless clone gets involved and manages to make a connection with the singer. I'm much more interested in episodes like this that happen to involve occult macabre elements, more so than giant bland blobs. We don't get to see that much of evil Mavis, and the fight scene could have been done better, but hey, at least it's memorable and fun. Unfortunately, the supporting cast in the show continues to be bland. Pedro has some more decent lines in this one, but that's not saying much. It's so odd that the show started off with so much promise. I'd heard such good things about the movies, and so I figured the show couldn't lose, yet here we are. I'm sure it's fine for people who are just big fans of the movies and don't really care as long as they see weekly Mavis shenanigans, but for those looking for good writing, maybe look elsewhere. But what did you think of the episode? Share your opinions below, and while you're here, please check out my merch store and Patreon. Links to those are in the description of this video and towards the end of the video. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. After a few lackluster episodes, we are finally getting back to something pretty darn good with Breakfast at Lydia's. The story is as simple as Mavis causing Chef Quasimodo to quit. She attempts to fix this by getting Jerome to become the new one. I really like this one for its humor. It wasn't as hit or miss like the past few episodes have been, and the limelight is more or less shined on Mavis as opposed to the less interesting side characters. Characters like Pedro have some focus, the bug does control him after all, but it's not as large as other episodes. Maybe that's why this one was so much more fun. I also like how Mavis couldn't convince Quasimodo to come back, and it was only upon hearing about Jerome that he storms back in. The episode made it seem like we'd get a scene where Mavis montages through eating his 99-course meal, but nope, she outright fails on the first dish, and it's hilarious. Well, it's pretty funny. Maybe not so much hilarious, but I do appreciate the twist. If we could get less of the children monster and more of Mavis, maybe I'd warm back up to this show. Oh no, don't look now, but it's an episode about Wendy. Yay. Actually, this one isn't all bad. Wendy remains a boring character, but I've got to hand it to the writers with their idea of splitting her up into tiny blobs. It kind of works. This half of the episode gives us much more of Dr. Gilman too, which is great because his macabre character is always fantastic. Why can't we just replace Wendy and have him be a more frequent character? Or better yet, why can't he just have his own show? I'd enjoy that way more. Anyway, the idea of a character owing another a life debt of protection is nowhere close to being a new idea in cartoons. And it only differentiates itself slightly with the concept of her splitting herself up to protect everyone. So as plots go, it's not all that great. Yes, execution matters, but this episode doesn't do that good a job. Mavis and Gilman were great, and so was Pedro, surprisingly. So, in conclusion, first part was really good, second was, okay. It's not the huge surge in quality I'd like, but maybe eventually the show's quality will taper out. Leave any thoughts you had on Sunday's episode down below. Be sure to check out my merch store or Patreon if you'd care to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. I'm scared to remember. More like, I'm afraid no one will remember this story. Okay, that was a terrible attempt at a joke, but the sentiment is true. The first half of this episode is just bland. The jokes don't hit, the plot sounds like it could be somewhat fun, but nothing is done with it, and then it ends abruptly. Some cartoons can get away with a bad outcome and then cutting to black, like Billy and Mandy. This show is not that, though. Maybe if they had had more real estate to expand on the idea of the characters filling in for the Ghost Rider, we'd have gotten something better. But probably not. Hank and the Real Boy is only marginally better than that. Hank's frustrated that his friends borrow his limbs all the time, so Mavis accidentally helps by turning him human with a lightning bolt. Guess that makes sense. The idea to take a monster and turn it into the very thing they're afraid of is a cool concept, right for comedy. I can't say much was really done with it, though. Besides a couple of kind of funny lines at the end of the episode, the comedy is pretty much limited to Hank forgetting he can't detach his limbs, which, as you would imagine, is not very funny the third, fourth, or fifth time it happens. The episode ends with Mavis electrocuting the house, which somehow turns Hank back to normal, without also electrocuting the humans. It's a tiny detail, but it broke my suspension of disbelief. In conclusion, two very awful stories end up making this a must-miss episode. After skipping out and reviewing the past two episodes, I'm saddened to come back to this series, still disappointed in its declining quality. It looks great, animates well, sounds amazing on paper, but in the end, the series' purpose seems to just be filler for fans until Hotel Transylvania 3 can come out. What about you? Any opinions on this episode? Share them down below. Thanks for watching. Take care. Hello lords and ladies, welcome back to Cartoon Hangout, your place for all things cartoon. So it's probably been a while since I reviewed this show, but honestly, with such diminishing returns, I just wasn't feeling that up to it. It started off good, then quickly took a right turn off a ledge. It's not the worst show I've seen, oh no, but it's just really boring. With that spiel out of the way, let's get into this week's new episode, shall we? Up first is Rapture, the very punny episode that has nothing remotely to do with the Rapture, so I have no idea why they named it as such. I like puns, but at least make it something to do with the actual episode. Alright, that's a slight nitpick, so let's move on. To be fair, Rapture isn't all that bad. Maybe my standards have hit rock bottom at this point, but I actually found it rather entertaining. Pedro loses his raps thanks to Mavis, and goes through the entire episode trying to replace them, and it genuinely ended up being pretty fun. And for once, the ending to the story wasn't so abrupt, it ruined the flow. The only negative thing I have to say is about Mavis's behavior. I know she's depicted as being pretty lazy and mischievous in previous episodes, not sure if this is accurate to the movies, and this is probably the result of being a teenager, but this episode really took it a step too far for me. She's the reason Pedro loses his raps in the first place, because she finds him drying off and decides to hit them with an axe, set them on fire, and scatter the ashes to the wind? Sure, she's not aware of who they belong to, but surely she could have taken a good guess as to what they were. Why go to such extremes to get rid of them? But archaic, it's just for comedic purposes. Okay, but this struck me as plain mean, not funny. And it does more to make Mavis out to be a bad person than a comedic one. Her punishment at the end is deserved. The next one is Becoming Klaus, which also isn't that bad an episode, if just a tad so-so. I like that Klaus goes through the trouble of making Mavis look just like him, only for his plan to backfire because he hadn't really stolen her friends. And all over a too slow joke. The whole thing was comical in a way, though it's weird to now realize that Mavis is actually walking around with one of her fangs and one of his. Huh. Well, there's nothing else to talk about. Nothing much else happens in this one. I basically just told you the entire episode's plot. And those were my thoughts on episode 11. Got any of your own to share? Comment below. Thanks for watching, and take care.